Read all about it. IMBY is here to headline the future of local news with community-driven journalism.
Next Pitch TV showcases the most innovative equity crowdfunding campaigns for the verdict of the crowd.
Today, we're turning the spotlight on IMBY, a revolutionary platform that empowers communities to create their own digital newspaper. IMBY stands for In My Backyard, and it's all about bringing hyper-local news to your fingertips, crafted by the people who live right in your neighborhood. Behind this innovative startup are John Isaacs and Enid Futterman, two visionaries passionate about reshaping how we consume and share local news. With their combined expertise in journalism and technology, they're on a mission to revive and rejuvenate community news, making sure every story that matters gets told.
So, all right. First of all, welcome to Next Pitch TV, where we showcase the most innovative equity crowdfunding campaigns for the verdict of the crowd. Now, it is interesting that IMBY doesn't really typically fit the criteria in the sense that you're using honeycomb, which is usually for debt raisers. Nothing wrong with that. We generally find that we focus on startups that do equity. Obviously, you are in this case also doing equity. But what really stood up for us was the whole concept for IMBY to essentially, I suppose, revive local newspapers, if I understand this correctly. However, let me shut up and let me give you an opportunity to tell our audience what it is exactly that IMBY is about, how it came about, and how you're doing.
Certainly. Well, we don't expect to revive local newspapers, but we expect to revive local journalism by providing IMBY as an option for, especially for communities and counties that don't have local news, but also for our area, which does, because it's very different from a newspaper, even an online newspaper. IMBY is a network of hyper-local websites for citizen journalism. So we provide a tool, a platform that allows any community to create its own digital newspaper by allowing members of that community to post news stories, feature stories, opinion pieces, reviews, memoirs, events, everything that would be seen and read in a newspaper or a digital or print. And we've been testing this for quite some time, and it works. You get people who, first of all, you get nonprofits who are very happy to post their news and their events in particular, but their news also. And you get what we in particular like very much are citizen activists who use IMBY as a way of being active, of advocating for their causes. And so it's citizen journalism as citizen activism. And we've had quite a lot of that. And most of the time, if not all of the time, the causes align with the values that we're trying to promote, which are localism, sustainability, and equality, justice, the things that most people don't argue with and think are good things. We don't promote a particular party or ideology. We're open to anyone as long as, the speech is not hate speech, as long as it's, acceptable. But the ideas don't have to be aligned with our ideas, although we do like to support those causes that we think are valid and important. That is in a nutshell.
So
I would add that.
Go ahead. I'm sorry, John. Please go ahead.
I would add that the project is, to some extent, let me give you a little background. it originated, we've both been in related industries. Enid was in advertising for years. Had a graphic design and publishing studio for many years. But we both have, an interest in journalism in general. And I've participated in the development and the publication of some, rather prestigious award-winning publications. Enid was a journalism major in college.
I was the editor of my college newspaper, but
And we both have, sorry.
that's okay. Since then, I have not been involved in journalism until we published our magazine before.
Well, that's where I was getting to.
I know.
But we both have a passion for print and journalism and so on. And when Enid and I met, several years later, we decided to publish. We got very involved in the community, both socially, obviously, and politically, and community affairs. And we felt there was a need for a magazine or a publication that crossed party lines and brought the community together. And we started a magazine called Our Town, which was quite an ambitious publication. It was a quarterly, but large format and handsomely designed. And we managed to attract a substantial stable of very good local journalists and writers. And it was a much loved magazine, and we published it for 10 or 11 years. But it was a labor of love. And so we decided, let's take this further somewhere else. And we've got to do it online. By that time, much as we love print, the print publications were really going down the drain. Local newspapers closing down or bought by conglomerates, but with dwindling circulations. There was obviously a crisis, and now well-documented crisis, in local journalism, which, by the way, is essential for community involvement and democracy at the end of the day, that a lot depends upon local news, especially in this huge country.
Well, there's a lot of data to show that people don't vote, much less, and run for office much less, when there is no local news source or very little local news. So there's a real impact that is positive and negative. Sorry, John.
It's okay. So what we did was come up with a model that is not only a model for a local news site, but a model for any local news site. The platform is pretty much instantly scalable. It costs us next to nothing to actually launch a website in wherever you are. We could do it tomorrow. But it's a matter of, and literally it could be anywhere. It's infinitely scalable in effect. However, we're constrained by needing an infrastructure to make that expansion. And we've so far operating, I think Enid mentioned, 32 sites in the Hudson Valley and the Berkshires of Massachusetts, both very vibrant and quite affluent areas. But in effect, we could start, an IMBY site in Provo, Utah tomorrow, and somewhere that doesn't have any local news whatsoever, and they could interact across IMBY. And as you see, if you've looked at the site, it's content rich, and people love to participate. They love the platform, and it serves the purpose of involving the community, and as Enid correctly mentioned, promoting citizen causes.
Right. I mean, this is what I find so fascinating, in the sense that what you're doing, from what I can tell, is really to create the next generation of local journalism.
Precisely.
That's exactly what we've called it, or something very similar to that.
Right.
Yeah.
Does it actually, and in other words, I can understand from the publishing, or in this case, digital publishing, etc., and the infrastructure, once you have it to scale it or expand it in itself is not that difficult. However, the other side of the equation, obviously, is that, well, even local journalists need to live of something. In other words, there has to be a source of income. In the past, that would always be advertising and so forth. How is that dealt with IMBY? In other words, yes, we'll give you the site and so forth to populate it, but how do those local newspapers ultimately make any money?
Well, again, it is advertising. We're doing it the same way because local businesses and local nonprofits need a place to advertise. And in news deserts, that's just as much missing as the news, a place for small local businesses, organizations to advertise. So that's our model, although there may be other income sources that we adopt along the way, like possibly subscription models and in addition, not instead of advertising, and merchandising and, all of the things that are being used. But we should add that IMBY theoretically could populate itself when it became as well known as, for example, Facebook and Instagram. But right now, and probably always, each county will need a citizen editor, just one person who does basically what I do, which is to nurture, troubleshoot, sometimes edit when needed, guide. It's a kind of guide to how to be a citizen journalist. We're going to have videos about that eventually, and really teach people. And they don't always have to be writers. They can just go to a town meeting or a county meeting with a phone and record it and perhaps comment on it. There are many ways to be a citizen journalist, but we think that initially it needs support.
Right. I mean, in effect, from what I can tell, it is a kind of almost a franchise model, not in the traditional sense, to be sure. But the idea of, hey, if you want a local newspaper or you had one and it's gone for whatever reason, here we provide you, or you provide them with essentially most, if not everything that they need, but it has to be run, So,
exactly. And they acquire it at no cost. That's the thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, the impact of that is, I think, very, or can be very dramatic. And I certainly applaud you for that, because you are so right. It is essential to our democracy that we have this level of interaction between the community and members. So I'm very happy to see this. This is a very positive way and very interesting way to address the decline, quite frankly, in local newspapers.
I think it's the best so far. There are a lot of individual community websites, but they take development and nurturing in a way that, IMBY will be providing a very, very sophisticated and robust platform for any community that needs it.
Right.
There are a lot of nonprofit initiatives and there's money that's supporting it, but they're usually either one town or two or three towns, and there's no way of scaling because they're labor intensive and they don't have our technology, and they just are what they are, which is admirable. And sometimes very good people, retired journalists, unemployed journalists, are doing it, but it's not a solution to the bigger problem. It's a solution piecemeal, here and there.
Quite so. Now, I notice this is your first equity crowdfunding campaign, if I see that correctly. What actually originally led you to decide to go this path as opposed to the more traditional angel path? VC probably wouldn't apply, but
well, we have a small stable of investors who have helped us.
They're not angels, though. They're not angels.
Not angels, local impact investors, and we raised significant amount of money to get to where we are. And then we devised a second round where we were going to go to additional contacts for substantial investment. And we got a lead investor who had invested previously, and he put in 100,000,
Wow.
which has kept us going for a little while. And then Enid had a meeting with somebody here upstate who suggested Honeycomb as, at least an interim source of funding. I mean, it's a modest amount of funding by any standard, and not nearly as enough that we require to, really take the next step with this. But it's certainly helpful, and as Enid might herself say and expresses so eloquently, Honeycomb, it's the equity crowdfunding. She always says dovetails beautifully with IMBY's commitment to crowdsourcing local news, which is a lovely idea. I mean, and it's resonated. Honeycomb have been extremely helpful, very, very supportive, and it has a nice air about it. The idea of involving, the community, and people can invest as little as $100, and it's got a nice flavor to it. But it's not the way we're going to be able to raise the money to support the kind of expansion that we have in mind.
No, I hear you. Although, at least I think that this first attempt at equity crowdfunding is very sensible, in the sense that, let's compare. If you raise the money, quote unquote, in the traditional way, you don't have a whole lot of control, especially when it comes to the terms. But what is much more important is the fact that when people invest, in this case, over Honeycomb or a platform like it, what is the amount? $100, $500, maybe $1,000 if you get lucky, not their life savings. And quite frankly, they better hold their breath if they expect a return, even though that's politically not correct to say so. But the point is that why are they investing in the first place? In many cases, I think, and I hope, they're investing because they love the idea.
Absolutely.
Give them a break. Give them a chance. If I get my money back or a return on it, wonderful. That's great. But if I don't, life goes on. From your point of view, however, you are at the same time not only gathering funding, but building an audience as well. So it's a real double whammy from the startup point of view, which is why I personally am so excited about equity crowdfunding. I mean, I've started 12 companies, and this wasn't available for me for the vast majority of them, to my regret, I have to say. So when this came about, it's kind of, darn, from the startup perspective, it doesn't get any better.
Well, thank you.
Thank you for saying that.
It was almost accidental. Somebody mentioned it to me in a meeting, and I looked at the website, and I just signed up for the newsletter because it did look like it was more about debt than equity. But the person who mentioned it said, "Oh, they do equity too." It may not say so on the website, which it didn't actually. And I just signed up, and I got a phone call that day from somebody who said, "Well, are you interested?" And I said, "Yeah, maybe." And it just snowballed, and they just kept saying, "Yes, yes, yes, let's do it." And yes, we can do equity. We do equity. And we enjoyed is probably a euphemism. It's hard work, but it's been interesting, and it's been exciting, and it's been a good introduction to crowdfunding. Somebody once said to us that, "Oh, don't do crowdfunding. It's a nightmare. You'll be dealing with tiny investments and bookkeeping for the rest of your life." And we just decided to forget about it at that point. And then when we were told that we wouldn't have to do the bookkeeping, that Honeycomb would be doing it, we would just have to find most of the, not all, but most of the investors. It's the complexion changed, and we thought, well, why not give this a try? And they are very supportive. Our offerings manager, whose name is Steph Jin, is absolutely lovely and so responsive and so helpful, and a cheerleader. She does whatever we ask and with enthusiasm, and it's been a very positive relationship. And what John was referring to is the way that I've put it in emails to potential investors. And I say we chose Honeycomb because their focus on crowdsourcing local capital dovetails beautifully with our focus on crowdsourcing local news.
Exactly.
And it does. And it's all about community and getting the whole community together. And because we knew we had a supportive community and people who were always sending us emails thanking us for what we do and, being full of praise. We've got, I don't know, pages of them. I've kept them to put in a business plan just to show what kind of level of community support we have. And this seemed like a very good idea to utilize that in a way that could allow us to move forward at least a step. And another reason we did it was because after we got that $100,000 lead investment, I found that New York State, the EDC, the Economic Development Committee Council Corporation, I think it's corporation, has a program where they will match funding as investment. It's not a grant. It's a matching investment up to $250,000. If you raise that much privately, you can apply for that much publicly from the state, and you have to raise it first. So we thought, well, let's see if we can find the other 150 and apply for the maximum. And that was the impetus, and it all just sort of came together, and we did it.
I love it.
May I add at this point? May I add that we do have a very well developed. We have all the business fundraising materials, business plan, pitch deck, executive summary, and so on, which we may be in the process of revising. We've got a lot of feedback lately, but it's pretty much in place to expand. So your thoughts on how we might raise additional capital would be extremely valuable.
Well, I will actually go into that in just a minute, but we are running out of time for the actual podcast. So let me first of all say I love what you're doing, and I think you're absolutely on the right path, and I wish you all the very best of luck on that. And we will go ahead and get this edited and published as quickly as possible, since your campaign has about 10 days or something in that range before it closes, if I see that correctly, yes?
Yeah.
June 3rd. It closes at the end of the day on June 3rd.
Right. So we'll get it processed promptly so that obviously we want to have the maximum impact for you.
Join John Isaacs and Enid Futterman in transforming local news with IMBY, because your community's voice deserves to be heard loud and clear. To know more about the featured campaign, subscribe now to nextpitch.tv.